So this video is going to be a horary demonstration. And basically, horary is the branch of astrology whereby you cast the chart at the hour in order to answer a specific question and to gain further insight about something. I find this particular branch of astrology to be extremely insightful and fascinating because it is essentially, I've heard it referred to as the tarot of astrology, but but my foundation of astrology, as you all probably know, was rooted in natal astrology. That's typically what I do on this channel. But I have found myself, kind of being very much so fascinated by horary. And interestingly enough, horary was, or I want to say it was the original form of astrology because you have to remember that back in like the early days, a lot of people didn't have their birth time um, unless you were a very important person like a queen or a king. Most people just didn't have it. So they came to astrologers in order to understand something or have an answer to a particular question. And so for the purpose or demonstration of this video, I'm going to be answering the question of, will I get accepted into college? So I had a client that applied to a particular university, and immediately after they applied, they sent their request for a reading to determine whether they had been accepted. And so I casted the chart for the hour, for the moment that I received the question. And this is the chart. So this was about 3 months ago. So as we can see here, Virgo is rising. And so the first house is going to represent Aquarius. This is going to represent them. And I just want to go over like one rule in horary astrology is that when you're asking a question about something to determine whether or not something will perfect or be accomplished, one way you can see if it will happen is you'll look to see if the ruler of the first house and the ruler of the house in which the thing being, inquired about, which in this case would be the ninth house because it is the house of higher education. You'll look to see if there's a connection between those two, mainly a conjunction. And you don't stop there. You look to see if there's a conjunction, and then you judge the dignity of the planets involved. And you have to pay attention to all of the aspects. And this is where, the whole benefic and malefic planet thing really, really, kind of comes out because in, modern astrology, there typically is a, turning away from using the term malefic or benefic. And there's sort of a neutralizing effect that is placed on a lot of the planets. But in horary astrology, you definitely, because, you know, malefic planets tend to say no, and benefic planets tend to say yes. It is important that we take that, into account, you know, in order to come to a judgment. So just to get into this reading, we have our querent here with Virgo rising, which means that they will be represented by the planet Mercury. And we see Mercury is in Capricorn, and it is in between the fourth and the fifth house. So um, right away, this would describe our queer as being someone that is quite serious minded about this. This is something that they're going to be taking very seriously. And there could be a bit of pessimism or negative thinking that they're exhibiting because Capricorn tends to be a pessimistic sign that looks at the glass as half empty. Now, now Capricorn and Mercury are both movable in terms of their orientation. So Capricorn is a movable sign, which is more commonly referred to as a cardinal sign, which means that it does represent movement and change of location or change in something. And Mercury is a planet that is convertible. So we see that Mercury is separating from a conjunction with Venus, and Venus is the planet that is ruling this ninth house. And so, with Venus ruling this ninth house, this serves as a strong indicator that the querent will be accepted into college because the ruler of the ascendant is with the ruler of the thing being inquired about, which in this case would be the ninth house. Now, the ninth house is a house of higher education, long range travel, college, and can even represent your in-laws. And I was a bit kind of, confused when I saw that Mercury was separating from Venus because I was like, that doesn't really make sense. Now, had they told me they had applied a while ago and they haven't heard back and they're just waiting for something, it would have made sense. But they had just applied. So I said, I don't understand why it's separating. But as I continued to look at this chart, I saw that Mercury was moving and applying towards this part of fortune. And so this right here is a point that is very important in both the natal and horary charts, depending on the horary chart, depending on what you're asking about. But the part of fortune represents acquisition and one's substance and prosperity. And it's often the point that represents the thing that is being sought after, which in this case would be, higher education. And so when I saw that Mercury was in close proximity with this point, I also interpret the part of fortune as like a benefic point, like similar to a benefic planet like Venus. And I saw this as another way of saying, yes, you will get accepted into college. But if you watch my channel, I have a video that is titled The Rule of Three, which means that I like to typically see something be confirmed in a chart at least 3 times before I say it is so. And so I continued to look at Mercury and I saw that it is also applying the to Uranus in the ninth house as well as the North Node in the ninth house. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so if a planet is applying to a planet, especially like a trine, which can represent like an easy relationship, I also see that as like confirmation that that thing is going to happen. And then I looked at Mars and Saturn, and because those are the malefics, and I wanted to see if there would be any sort of like reformation or prohibition to thwart this from happening because they have that potential. And here I see we have Saturn in the sixth house. This is the house of bad fortune. But Saturn is in his own dignity. And a planet in its own dignity, even if it's a malefic, it tends to function in a more benefic way. And Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn. And so this Mercury is, you know, in Saturn's territory. And so in this case, Saturn would not be acting as a malefic or acting in a way to thwart the querent because, this gets showing that Saturn and Mercury are really on the same page. And then I looked at Mars in the 10th house, and there is essentially no aspect between Mercury and Mars. Now, I also want to mention that in medieval astrology, the Egyptian lots were extremely important, and they were thought to be a way in which the astrologers were able to get extremely specific about a chart. And so there actually is a lot of higher education, and we derive that by taking the ascendant and adding it to the ninth house and subtracting it from Mercury. And when you do that for this chart, it takes us to 0 degrees Capricorn, which confirmed it for me. Yes, this person will be accepted into university. And this question was asked 3 months ago, like around December. And they did, in fact, get accepted into the particular university. And so I was able to provide them with that, reassurance. And I was also able to be reassured that I had properly, answered the question by using the techniques of horary astrology. And so I just wanted to, provide this video as a nice little demonstration on how, I don't want to say easy horary can be, but how straightforward it can be. And um, I also want to talk about the moon before I end this video because the moon is the co-significator for the Aquarian as well. And so I never really um want to come to a judgment as well without looking at the moon, which I did look at the moon. And the first thing I noticed is that the moon is in the 12th house, which at the time I, inferred that the Aquarian was probably in a state where she was probably um anxious or not feeling like maybe that environmentally she wasn't in a good place. And so there could have been some things going on in the home life or things going on that may have caused this person to feel like they weren't going to be able to even go, even if they did get accepted. There was another issue. And but when I saw that the moon was forming in opposition to Saturn, I refer to this as like a breakaway aspect. When you see moon and Saturn, that can point to some type of separation or movement away from what's familiar or what's home. And in this case, they're both in cadent houses, which are thought to be houses that represent travel and movement. And that is important because the university was not very close by. It was about like, I think, a few hours west of where the Querent lived. And that also is important because this is the west side of the chart. And as we can see from the planet's position, it is, moving westward. So, and then the moon is also applying to a trine with the sun in Sagittarius. And this is a very benefic trine because the moon is giving the sun his domicile. And trines, as we all know, facilitate things. And so this is also a good sign because the sun represents higher education as well as intelligence. And um, Sagittarius is a sign that is often thought to be associated with pursuits of philosophy and higher education. So, um, yeah. So I hope you all found this video informative and insightful. There are many other ways that I probably could have come to the conclusion of yes without, talking about the specific things that I mentioned. And I think that's the beauty in horary, because there are astrologers that, we tend to take different approaches to things. But as long as we come to the same judgment at the end, that's really all that matters. And so if you found this video insightful, please like this video, comment down below. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe. And if you would like a natal chart interpretation or you have a burning question that you want answered, don't be afraid to send me an email. I will have it in the description box below. Thank you for watching.